the United States is very clear. Cannot bank on China, cannot let China continue to take the world for a ride like China did post-COVID 2020, diversify supply chains. Now that's advantage India. We're looking at these images, live images that are coming in from the White House. This is where the press conference or the statements will be made both by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the US President Joe Biden. Agreements will be exchanged after this bilateral, this extended bilateral that is currently on, and I believe a couple of questions will be taken. But Sushant, Sareen, you heard Ro Khanna there, and the United States appears to be very clear. China is the problem. You don't want a hegemon in this area, and China is not just a threat for India. Sushant, Sareen, we've been saying this all along. The Americans finally seem to have realized this, that China is a threat not just for India, but for the entire democratic free world. And if not checked now, it will threaten America in a very big way in the coming decades.
Gaurav, to be fair to the Americans, they were not the only ones who were taken in by the Chinese. I think we too fell for, this whole nonsense of the peaceful rise of China. And even though we had our concerns with, what the Chinese were doing, the growing Chinese power, but I think somewhere along the line there was a sense in India that, everything will remain hunky-dory between the two countries. Nobody, or at least the Chinese, will not push things over the edge, which clearly they have done. They have been pressing us consistently over the last 20-25 years. What their strategy against us has been that they catch us in these petty little things, this Sajid Mir holding on to the designation of terrorists or a couple of other stuff like this, and then they will give in after some time, but in return they'll try and look for something bigger, So I think it is important for us to not get caught up into this nonsense which the Chinese are trying to foist on us, number one. Number two, I personally think that we cannot and we should not try and match the Chinese gun for gun, tank for tank, missile for missile. I think we need to rethink how we are going to stop the Chinese, how we are going to counter them. And I think we have some very smart people in the military who can do it. But having said that, a closer partnership with the Americans, I think, is something which really works very well for us as well as for the Americans. Does that mean that we are going to open a second front in the case the Chinese open a front somewhere else against the Americans? I don't think we've reached that stage yet.
Okay.
We might in the future. But I think for now, the fact that if we are able to, what General Hasnain was also saying, and I think that is something which people need to take very seriously. In the old days, Rahul, I don't remember if you knew that old hockey rule that there used to be a D, and the Indian players were very adept at taking the ball up to the D, but never being able to convert it into a goal. The same thing is happening in many of the, economic deals which we are striking. Many of the investments that we are trying to attract, we take the ball into the D and at the last minute we falter. General Hasnain gave the example of the nuclear deal. Yes. I could give you many others. And I think we need to really raise up our act so that we can actually become the very attractive investment destination which we are, which is something which will give us technology, not because we are going to negotiate for it, but in the natural course of things. Okay. This constant refrain which we have, transfer us the technology, that's nonsense. We should not even be looking for it. We will develop the technology once our people get trained. When these investments come in, people start working on it. We have bright people. They will develop our own technologies.
Sure. But isn't that the effort?
Experience.
Isn't that the effort right now? Take what you get, Abhishek. And when it comes to China, Abhishek, clearly Pakistan is no longer a threat for us. And if you notice, nobody is talking about Pakistan because I think post Balakot, Abhishek, there's a realization the only weapon Pakistan had in its arsenal was terror, and India knows how to punish that terror. That punishment, that gap that we've had with China, I think the desperation is to reduce that gap to be able to ensure that China does not do any more salami slicing of our territory.
Gaurav, in the last few years, there are very few stories of big shows that we've done focusing on Pakistan, isn't it? Our focus has been China in our newsroom, and a very similar thing has been seen when it comes to your military leadership, your political leadership. Pakistan is almost off the discourse, as you said now. The reason for that is what China has been up to, not just in Ladakh since 2020, but we had Doklam before that, and 2013 Depsang.
Yes.
And it's the Depsang ghost that is still bothering you now, because whenever you talk to them and you say that you need to leave Depsang, retreat from here, China just goes into a dilly-dallying mode and says this is a legacy issue and things like that. So intentions are very clear, and every aspect of India's security strategy now begins with how we need to deal with China, which wasn't the case a little earlier.
That's the immediate threat. That's the immediate threat, General Hasnain. Closing this gap. There was a huge gap between India and China when it came to defense. As you know better, you've served so extensively along the line of actual control. But with these GE-414 engines or the MQ-9 Sea Guardian drones for ISR or over-the-horizon intelligence gathering, how much of the gap are we closing in terms of, one, intelligence sharing with America, two, getting anti-submarine warfare equipment? What more do we need to do with America, with other democracies to ensure that we are stronger to take on China's salami slicing?
See, Gaurav, this can't be a one-time affair. Whenever you're doing transformation, particularly, it has to be a progressive thing which must take place over generation or 2 generations at least. This is how the United States developed it. After 1990, after the Gulf War, all the lessons learned from the Gulf War, the United Nations carried out its own transformation. The Indian transformation should have taken off in 2004, 2005, got delayed by a couple of years, 10, 11 years almost. So today, I'm looking at the deals that we are talking about just now primarily as triggers. And there's no doubt that if they substantially reach the stages of finalization, and finally you find in about 2 years or 3 years all this technology coming in, many of them off the shelf, being able to be able to purchase them, definitely is going to close the gap. But as someone very clearly and correctly said, let's not chase parity. Let's try reducing and diluting asymmetry. That is the principle. The concept should be to try and dilute the asymmetry so that our levels of deterrence, what is dissuasion today, must rise to deterrence tomorrow. We must be able to train our human resource capabilities all along the northern borders too at the same time. There are vulnerabilities galore all over. It's not that 5 or 6 deals are going to close down all these vulnerabilities. This has to be a progressive thing, and I think a very good direction has been taken by this visit.
Okay.